So the answer to your question as it relates to that, we all know when, Vice President Kamala Harris ran for, Attorney General, and you can fact check me on this. News outlets said she's the first Indian American. She did run as Indian American, okay, and then she was chosen for the vice president nominee as the candidate for Joe Biden, and he was told that you will get a black woman. So then she says, well, here is a black woman. So in all fairness, when she asked that question to President Trump, that's a valid answer, because that's based on her, where she was in her life, what she chose to be at that time. So that's where that answer comes in. So she's the one that did this. She's the one that
hold on 1 second. I want to just make clear. I know we're on this panel.
But am I lying?
Excuse me, sir. Do not overtalk me. I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak. Excuse me. Do not overtalk me on my program. I am trying to give. That's why, if you would allow me to speak, I would clarify the opportunities for each of you on the panel to have a chance to speak and have your own point heard to an audience who's eager and speaking with bated breath to hear your opinion.
We on the Trump train, again, you can't hang, 'cause you watching fake news, fake news, fake news, fake news. Jesus, he died for you, he loves you, you know it's true. He's good news, good news, good news, good news.
There's a really pretty interesting story happening regarding Kamala Harris, and it's got a little bit of everything, man. It's got her truthfulness, her family, her virtue signaling, her race, more specifically, whether she is or is not black. But basically, the story is being completely ignored by the media. And I don't know if they're just gun shy about all the race related stuff. I don't know if this maybe just feels a little bit too much like Obama birtherism to them. But most likely, I think they probably ignore it because it doesn't fit their narrative, right? And more than that, it really does risk exposing them. And personally, I really don't like talking about the race-related stuff either, but this is a story worth talking about. And it's pretty interesting, man. This might be the first race-related story that the woke left progressives of the world don't want to talk about. They absolutely want to ignore this. These people love nothing more than talking about race. And really, more than talking about it, they like banging straight white male colonizers straight over the head with anything and everything race related. And here's where we're at. Here's what I'm talking about. Candace Owens has been doing a pretty major deep dive into Kamala's family, and she's found some pretty interesting things. And I'm going to show you some of that first, but then I want to show you some of the attacks that Candace Owens has been taking for nothing more than just sharing facts. But before we dig into the way the left is coping, the way they're treating Candace Owens, I think it's pretty important to show the kind of work that Candace is actually doing.
Now, I'll ask you, when did you first get the idea that Kamala was black? Well, you'll say, yeah, when she kind of started running with Joe Biden. And that claim really came from Kamala herself. When they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, they understood that. Kamala Harris published a book in 2019 called The Truth That We Hold. And presumably the book was filled with truth that she was holding. I had a look through it. And I saw this picture of her and her grandmother, clearly a black-looking grandmother, on page 282 in the photograph section. It reads, as you can see, visiting my paternal grandmother, Beryl, in Jamaica. Also on that same page, there's another photo of her. Again, you can see it's black and white. I'm not quite sure why it is black and white, but it says, when I was 10 months old, I visited Spanish Town, Jamaica. This is me with my mother and my paternal grandfather, Oscar Joseph. And now this guy looks mixed. He looks Asian of some description, but you can see the idea here is that she's definitely trying to introduce, in a manner of photos, things that make her race look more complicated. So I just decided to investigate that, and immediately things got weird, very weird. First and foremost, because it was very easy for me to determine via just a light search online that Beryl, her alleged paternal grandmother that you just saw, died 4 years before Kamala was born in 1960. So last night we decided to continue our research to see if we could find birth certificates and marriage certificates and death certificates, which could further signify those points, and indeed it did. And it also raised even more questions about her genealogy. So let's go through those. Here is the birth certificate for her paternal grandmother. This is Kamala's paternal grandmother, Beryl. Okay, now you can see on this birth certificate that Beryl is spelled with an I. It's Beryl Magdalene. And you can see the reason why we know this is the correct Beryl is because the mother is listed as Iris Finnegan. Later on, we're going to show you in the book, she names Iris Finnegan as her great-grandmother. So that would be Beryl's mother. So we have the right woman. Also, formerly, her maiden name is Allen. That is true. It also says here that she's born in October of 1917 in St. Anne. That's the St. Anne parish of Jamaica. And again, you can see it says that it is signed by Iris Finnegan. Very clearly, this is the woman that we are looking for. This is Kamala's grandmother, alleged grandmother, Beryl. It's also interesting, by the way, that it lists her great-grandmother as a seamstress because Donald Harris, Kamala's father, wrote in a 2020 piece called Reflections of a Jamaican Father, quote, Miss Iris, that again would be his grandmother, was the mother of 8 children, too, was the sweetest and gentlest person one could meet, but underneath it was a tough farming woman who ran the cane farm at Thatch Walk near Ainentown, jointly owned with her husband, Mr. Christie. Okay, that's weird. So you're telling me that she ran a farm because on that birth certificate it says that actually Iris was a seamstress, but whatever. Let's just park that aside for a second and stick with Beryl, this woman who died before Kamala was born, okay? Because I was feeling pretty certain that not too many people were going to be named Beryl and be born in the St. Anne parish of Jamaica in 1917 to a mother named Iris Finnegan. I felt confident that we could find a little bit more data, and in fact, we did, okay? First, we stumbled across Beryl's marriage certificate, okay? So you can see that right here, and now the name spelling has changed. You have Beryl Finnegan spelled with a Y in the same way that Kamala spells it, and it lists their married date as 1944. Again, you can see the parish that is listed is St. Anne Parish. This is where every piece of Beryl's life seems to take place. It reads here that her calling is a barmaid. And something that jumped out at me was the fact that she's married to someone, as you can see, named Lawford Newland. Okay, so Beryl apparently was married more than once because Lawford Newland is not Donald Harris's father, but Beryl is his mother. So just to be clear, again, it says that she married a guy named Lawford Newland in 1944 when she was 25 years old, okay? It's important to note that that would have been 4 years after she gave birth to Donald Harris, Kamala's father. I find that to be very strange. Also, regarding Kamala's father, we cannot seem to locate, regarding Lawland Newland, the person that she married, we can't find him. Can't find him anywhere. We cannot find a birth certificate. We cannot find a death certificate. We can't find a news item or otherwise. I cannot find this alleged Lawford Newland that apparently her grandma got married to. We also can't find a wedding certificate for Beryl and Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown Harris. That is allegedly supposed to be Donald Harris's father. Okay, so Kamala's grandfather is Oscar Wilde Joseph Brown Harris, and we can't find a marriage certificate between the two of them. That's very strange. As speculated, we were able to confirm that Kamala's Black grandmother that she showed us in that picture died in 1960. Before Kamala was born. I can show you right now her death certificate. Let's take a look at Beryl's death certificate, which confirms. As you can see there, it says that she died in July of 1960. It also tells us on the right-hand side, you guys will probably have to zoom in on this, but she died of a uterine infection, uterine fibroids due to a hysterectomy. It has her listed as 39 years. That's actually a couple of years off from 1917, so somebody may have gotten their math wrong here. But you once again see that it lists her birthplace as St. Anne. And so this is a huge scandal. Just an absolutely huge scandal. Kamala Harris published in her book that she was standing next to her grandma Beryl, But Grandma Beryl died in 1960, 4 years before Kamala Harris was born. So who the hell is the real Beryl?
Yeah, obviously there's a lot to unpack there, right? And I let that run a long time because Candace Owens, man, she just does a really, really great job. There's not a lot to add there. But the thing that jumps out most to me, well, besides the fact that Kamala Harris actually wrote a book, but she did write a book. And in that book, she's got a picture that shows her as an adult standing next to a very, very black woman that she claims is her grandmother, Beryl. But the problem is the real Beryl actually died before Kamala was even born. And I found another pretty interesting thing about that picture. That picture was actually removed in the second edition of that book that was released just a few months after the first edition of that book. And what that tells me, these people know that their narrative or their truth is so fragile that they were already trying to cover their tracks and protect it. And I was going to just dig into more of what Candace found. I was going to show you that. But then I found this black propagandist using literally textbook white supremacist language to justify Kamala's blackness, for lack of a better term, while at the same time claiming that Candace Owens herself is some kind of white supremacist. Man, you cannot make this stuff up. And I'm going to show you this guy. Basically, he's using the one drop rule to explain that Kamala is whoever she says she is. And we just got to believe it. Pretty amazing stuff.
All right. Candace Owens is out here in these streets doing everything she can to carry the water of white supremacists. Let's just be honest about it. Now, there are 3 things that she's attempting to do. I watched her video last night where she is going through the genealogical record of Kamala Harris, and she's trying to debunk Kamala's claim that she is a black woman, and it is really pathetic. But as an attorney, I know exactly what she's doing. All right. And I'm going to explain to you what she's doing and how we can counter what she's doing. So first of all, she's trying to create a scandal by arguing that Kamala is really white and that she lied about being black when she, for example, lied about the identity of the woman she claims was her grandmother. So she's saying that Kamala's book is ripe with lies. I mean, it's filled with lies because Kamala has the picture of her grandmother and some other pictures in the book. And Candace is saying that she basically lied when she said that this woman, this particular woman, was her grandmother. It is a crazy argument, but that's what she's doing.
And this is exactly why I needed to show you Candace's actual work, right? This guy is out there telling the faithful that Candace Owens says that Kamala's book lies when it shows her standing next to a woman that they all claim is sweet old grandmother Beryl. And he says that it's actually crazy. He says it's crazy. It's just Candace trying to create a scandal, but he isn't going to show people the actual work. He won't show people that the grandmother allegedly died before Kamala was even born. He just basically implies that questioning whether or not the picture is accurate or real is crazy. But this is who these people are. This is what they do. They expect you literally to just blindly believe everything they tell you. And they expect you to believe that Candace Owens is a crazy white supremacist. Then that's basically all they think you need to know.
She's doing. She's trying to create a scandal. She's trying to say that there's this big scandal because Kamala wrote a bunch of lies in her book to cover the fact that she is really an Indian white woman. I mean, it is crazy. I mean, you can see with your own eyes that Kamala is black, but
I promise, guys, I'll try not to stop it so much, but you got to question that. I mean, this guy says that you can just see with your own eyes that Kamala Harris is a black woman. And I got to ask, I mean, can you? Is that easy for people? I'm no expert, but I cannot really see that when I look at her. And honestly, I think that if it was that plain that we could all just see it when we looked at her, I don't think we'd even be having this conversation, but we are having this conversation. And like I said, man, the race conversation is usually a conversation that these people just love to have. They usually force it on you. I mean, it's generally a conversation that they prefer to have, but they don't want to talk about it. You know, Kamala herself really doesn't even want to talk about it.
feel, or what do you think when you hear people kind of questioning just the fabric of who you are?
Well, one, I don't listen to it.
Okay.
I'm really clear about who I am, and if anybody else is not, they need to go through their own level of therapy. That's not my issue.
Their issues, right?
My mother was very clear. She was raising two black girls to be two proud black women, and it was never a question. You know, it's funny because over the years, journalists, some, not most, will want to talk about it. And I say, okay, if you want to have this conversation, I'm prepared to have it, but sit down and get comfortable for a few hours. If you want to start talking about race in America, you want to talk about the 1/8 rule?
A drop.
Right. You want to talk about what it means in terms of who you are perceived to be and the impact that can have on the rest of your life, regardless of who you actually are in terms of your God-given capacity and the rights that you have and should have. So, you know, I don't mess with that. I think that's other people trying to figure some stuff out that, and they
got some issues.
They got to deal with it themselves.
So apparently the lady who breaks out fake accents with certain crowds doesn't really want to talk about race. You know, she'll basically only talk about race in the most superficial ways possible. You know, she talks about washing colored greens in the bathtub. She talks about being raised, my Indian mama raised a proud black girl. And then she'll have, things like Meg the Stallion twerk for crowds in Atlanta, right? But for some reason, in any of these talks about race, she's not busting out the picture of old Grandma Barrel in any situations like this, right? She says that she'll talk about her race and race in America if you're ready to talk about the one drop rule. And here's the thing, she's in luck because basically all of her rabid defenders, they seem to want to talk about the one drop rule.
But Candace is out here desperately trying to create a scandal. And the reason why she wants a scandal so bad is because Kamala is basically scandal free. She's been a prosecutor for 30 years, right?
Dude, these people, they say the same thing about Barack Obama. I think they just try to speak these things into existence and just hope that you believe it. They say Kamala Harris is scandal free. And I'm here to tell you that she's not. And, the point of this video is not to litigate all of Kamala's scandals, but I will tell you that there are many. And if I had to pick just one, if I just had to prove it with just one, I'd pick the fact that when the Supreme Court ordered California to reduce its insanely egregious prison population by releasing first-time nonviolent offenders, then Attorney General Kamala Harris defied the Supreme Court. And when asked why they were defying the Supreme Court, her office said that releasing these predominantly black male marijuana offenders, basically what they were, if they were to release them, it would cause a labor shortfall in the California prison population. So the scandal-free Kamala Harris kept these men in prison to basically serve as slave labor for the Department of Corrections in California. And basically years later also laughed about the fact that she was smoking weed herself at the time, the entire time. And if that's not a scandal, then I don't really know what would be qualified as a scandal.
Right? And she's been elected over and over again. So she is desperate. The Trump team is desperate to create a scandal. So that's number one. Number two, she's trying to redefine Kamala. Kamala knows who she is, and she knows she is a black woman, and she knows that her forefathers on her father's side are black people, although there is probably some mixture because, listen, that's the way things were during slavery. Those white men were raping those African women. I have it in my own family. Okay. For example, my great-great-grandfather, my paternal great-great-grandfather is a white man. I mean, a white man, full-blooded white man. So there is in my DNA quite a bit of European blood, quite a bit. But I'm still black. I am still an African American because we know in this country, one drop of that black blood will make you black anyway.
So this guy whose video chyron literally says Candace Owens is again promoting white supremacy is himself, as he says those words, spreading white supremacist anti-black racism. He basically says, if Kamala Harris has even one drop of black blood, then that's what she is. But I mean, here's the thing. The one drop ideology was invented by people that really were white supremacists. They really were racist. And it basically said that anyone that had any black lineage at all was less than people that don't. But now it's wild, man. The race hustlers of the world are using this to what they think are their advantage, I think. And now they're using racist white supremacist ideology to say that Kamala Harris says she's black, so that's exactly what she is.
And why, this is the same whole stuff he did with Obama.
Yeah.
He made people think there was something wrong. Obama, his mom was white, his dad was black. Now, if the KKK were chasing him, they say, there goes a black man.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay? If KKK was chasing Kamala, they say there goes a black woman.
And if the KKK was chasing Trump, they'd say it goes an orange guy.
Yeah. There you go.
I've been a member of the National Association of Black Journalists for about 20 years.
Mm-hmm. And the same sorority as...
And the same sorority, which is
Kamala.
historically black sorority, right? Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She went to an HBCU, Howard University. She was the president of the Black Law Students Association in her law school. She joined the Congressional Black Caucus when she became a senator. She is a black woman. And to your point, Whoopi, in this country, if you are biracial, but you have any drop of black blood in you, you are considered a black person.
That was the one-drop theory,
That's
as
the
a matter of
one-drop
fact.
theory.
Yes.
We didn't make those rules.
No.
Those rules were made for us. And I think when I'm a biracial person, right? I have a black father and a white mother. And the KKK is going to find me and round me up with every other black person. And so I think this is my lived experience and it's her lived experience. And I think to question someone's racial identity,
Especially him,
the bar has fallen so low.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Sunny Hostin says that she didn't invent the one drop rule. She says those rules were made for them, she says. And she's right. I mean, it was. That rule was made for non-whites by white supremacists, right? And somehow ancient white supremacist ideology has become some sort of justification for the modern day American left, which honestly, as I say that out loud, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, this really is who and what these people are. This is what the Democrat Party even is. But I mean, it's funny. I mean, it's a little off topic, but every time I see Sunny talking about race, I see the look on her face when she learned that she herself come from a long line of slave owners. It's pretty freaking priceless.
She was on PBS's Finding Your Roots, a show dedicated to researching celebrity ancestry. For context, Sunny is a staunch supporter of reparations and has made a fortune spewing nonsense about white privilege and racial justice. Well, turns out she's not as oppressed as she claims she is. She's actually the descendant of slave owners from Europe. Here's how she took the news. Roll it.
Wow. I'm a little bit in shock. I just always thought of myself as Puerto Rican, half Puerto Rican. I didn't think I was, my family was originally from Spain and slaveholders.
Yeah. So how are you feeling, my friend?
I think it's actually pretty interesting that my husband and I have shared roots.
Yeah.
So I do appreciate that. And I think it's great for our children to know this information. I guess it's a fact of life that this is how some people made their living, on the backs of others.
Fact of life. Interesting change of tune. For more.
Obviously, that's not the point of this video, but it's pretty damn priceless, man. And I cannot miss an opportunity to show that. I think I might clip that in every time Sunny Hostin talks about race. So Sunny Hostin comes from a long line of slavers and a long line of slaveholders, which she actually has in common with Kamala Harris, believe it or not. Kamala Harris, her family allegedly owned a lot of slaves in Jamaica. I can't really find the information about how many, but I can find that when Britain ended slavery and compensated all the slave owners, they gave her great whatever, they gave him the equivalent of 11 million modern day British pounds. So I'm guessing that they own quite a few. But like Sonny said, it's just a fact of life. Every U.S. president comes from a family that held slaves. Well, actually, that's not true. Not every single president. There is one U.S. president whose family never owned any slaves.
You had a fascinating column today. You spoke about a university study that revealed Trump is the only living president not to have descended from slave owners.
Yeah,
Tell me about this.
Yeah, well, look, I just thought it was rather amusing because, as you know, in the United States, Donald Trump is constantly attacked for supposedly being racist and against black people. And then Reuters did this huge investigation, which must have taken months, where they went back through the genealogies of all of the high court judges and all the congressmen and women and former presidents. And they discovered that the only president who was alive who did not come from slave owners was Donald Trump. So they must have been extremely upset with that conclusion. But that's why I wrote it. But I mean, more generally, it's an interesting piece because it does show that many people in the US do descend from former slave owners, which is an embarrassment for the nation, you have to admit.
How funny is that? Can you imagine being just the average dim leftist and finding out that the only American president who doesn't descend from slave owners is the racist, bloodbath, evil dictator guy, right? I mean, that's about as awesome as it gets. These are my favorite kind of stories. I mean, these are the stories you just cannot make up if you tried. I mean, even Barack Obama is the descendant of slave owners, but not Donald Trump. It's awesome, right? And Barack Obama, while we're on that topic, he says that Kamala's only losing because black men won't do what the machine tells them and just fall in line like they do every other 4 years.
Communities is that we have not yet seen the same kinds of energy and turnout in all quarters of our neighborhoods and communities as we saw when I was running. Now, I also want to say that seems to be more pronounced with the brothers. So if you don't mind, just for a second, I'm going to speak to y'all directly and say that when you have a choice that is this clear, when on the one hand you have somebody who grew up like you, knows you, went to college with you, understands the struggles and pain and joy that comes from those experiences. Who's had to work harder and do more and overcome and achieves the second highest office in the land.
Dude, this guy, man, Barack Obama says that when you have a choice that's this clear, and obviously the choice is not as clear as he thinks it is, or we wouldn't even be having this conversation, but just listen to what this guy says, right? He says that the choice is so clear. When you got someone that grew up like you, someone that knows you, like they always say, well, I'm not even sure what that means, but someone who went to college with you and someone who understands the struggles, he said. And honestly, as I watch him say that, I got to wonder how many of the black men he's scolding, I wonder how many of them thought that that's what they were getting when they voted for him, because that's exactly how he presented himself, right? But he didn't show up, right? He didn't deliver that, right? And that did not work out too well, right? But another thing that I think about when I'm listening to this kind of nonsense, he's not even describing Kamala Harris. He's actually describing J.D. Vance. Kamala did not grow up like anyone here. She grew up in freaking Canada, right? She doesn't know the struggle. I mean, these people don't care about the struggle, right? They don't care about overcoming and persevering and working harder than anyone else. If they did, they would absolutely love J.D. Vance, which of course they did. They did love J.D. Vance. When they read his book and when they watched his movie, they loved him. I mean, they literally loved him right up to the point that he put a big R after his name. But anyway, I don't want to digress. Barry says that it's all the fault of black men, and they need to just do as they're told, and support the queen, even if they need to subscribe to white supremacist ideology to do it.
In other words, that's the way people will see you, right? And you do yourself a big favor if that's the way you see yourself. And so I love my blackness, although I have bona fide, I've done my DNA, I have bona fide white ancestors. So for somebody like Candace Owens or Donald Trump to say, well, Augustus just found out or just began to identify with his blackness, knowing that I've identified as a black person all my life, that's crazy. So she and Trump and that whole GOP thing, that whole MAGA thing, they are desperately trying to redefine Kamala and make Kamala who they want Kamala to be, not who Kamala knows that she is.
That's it right there, man. This guy talks about, Kamala Harris knows exactly who she is and what she is or whatever. I think it's pretty clear that she doesn't have a clue who she really is. And if she does know who she really is, she definitely doesn't want you to know who she really is. She needs to be as ambiguous as possible so that she can basically be whoever she needs to be at any given moment. It's kind of interesting when you think about it. We saw earlier Sunny Hostin said that she considers herself Puerto Rican, basically when it's convenient. But she also talks about being black whenever it's convenient. And Kamala Harris allegedly considered herself Indian when it was convenient, not that long ago. And, it really wasn't all that long ago that it was convenient for the media as well. I mean, the same media now telling you that you're basically an insane racist for even questioning the narrative were pretty adamant that Kamala Harris was Indian.
My mother, who raised me and my sister, was a proud woman. She was a brown woman. She was a woman with a heavy accent.
And her mother, Shamla Gopalan, was also the biggest influence in Kamala Harris's life.
The answer is absolutely yes, Joe.
After the big announcement, Harris's sister wrote in a Twitter post, "You can't know who Kamala Harris is without knowing who our mother was." In 1958, a precocious 19-year-old Indian, Gopalan traveled thousands of miles from her home and family to pursue a doctorate in nutrition and endocrinology in America. She soon became an active civil rights crusader while studying at UC Berkeley.
But once she went there, she almost felt free. And she took part in politics. She used to bring a whole series of literature, leftist literature from Karl Popper's, he was a great philosopher.
In her book, Harris says, "There is no title or honor on earth I'll treasure more than to say I am Shamla Gopalan Harris's daughter." Harris's visits to India with her mother kept her connected to her roots. Her grandfather, who had strong views on humanitarian issues, worked closely with officials to reallocate refugees. Their conversations had a strong influence on her.
Those walks along the beach in India really planted something in my mind and created a commitment in me before I even realized it that has led me to where I am today.
Harris's maternal uncle, Gopalan Balachandran, who lives in Delhi, tells us how the senator turns to her amma, which means mother in Tamil, for guidance even after her death.
I don't have to tell her, make your mother proud. She said, what are you telling me? Everything that I do, I ask myself, would Amma approve of this?
Kamala in Hindi means lotus flower and is an important symbol in Indian culture, rooted deep in the bottom of the river. Very similar to Harris's Indian identity, which she wears on her sleeve. There's no doubt that the primary source of learning for Senator Harris was from her mother's experiences and the conversations that she had with her maternal grandfather when she visited India, which was very often accompanying her mother, or when the grandparents would visit them in America. Back to you, Rosemary.
Not a lot of mention of an ambiguous racial identity. That is, the person they're describing is not the person you'd imagine putting on fake accents or talking about being such a renowned cooker of collard greens that she had to wash them all in a bathtub. The guy in the main video talked about people desperately wanting to redefine Kamala, when in reality, what she is and who she is and what she believes is constantly redesigned and constantly reimagined. I mean, she opened the border, but now she's an immigration hawk. She's the face of the new party, moving forward, not looking back, but there's nothing that she would change or do differently than Joe Biden. Everything about the woman is fake, which is exactly why this is the only race conversation that the woke progressives don't want to have, because they recognize that if people start to realize that even her own identity is faked, then everything else about her is probably fake and probably manufactured as well. And that's exactly what this is about. They desperately need enough people to blindly believe, blindly trust, and blindly follow her, as many people as possible. And guys, we have to make sure that does not happen, man. Share these videos and vote and vote, vote. Take as many people as you possibly can to vote. I mean, that's all I got, guys. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you haven't already, man, be a part of our growth. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Most importantly, share the channel. I'll see you in the next one.